Welcome to Prepare Them for Launch. This season, we've had the awesome opportunity to talk to so many awesome people about their amazing stories, and we are going to continue on with that today. We have the amazing Emily Hamilton here, who is one of our worship pastors here at Friends Church, and in a few weeks, she's going to be a first-time mom. So Emily, welcome in.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here to talk about something that I don't know that much about.
I think a lot of first-time moms feel that way for sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, we're so excited to have you, Emily, and I know a lot of our church members know who you are and what you're all about, but for those listeners that are meeting you for the first time, we'd love for you to just introduce yourself and share a little bit about who you are.
Yeah. So my name's Emily. I'm married to my husband, Johnny, and we've been married for 9 years. We spent really the majority of our whole relationship doing music together and graduating college and then traveling for 10 years and doing music on the road and leading worship. And so music has been a really big part of really both of our journeys together as a couple. And then when, COVID happened, it shifted everybody's lives, and that included us. And so it took us off the road and really allowed us to plug into a community, and that community was Friends. And so now I've been here for just over 2 years in different capacities, and the ability to, on a music level and a ministry level, like really dive in and be a part of a consistent community has been incredible. But then also, like, COVID allowed us to stop and say, oh, we're planted in one place, we can have kids, because before that was just not an option, or it felt like it wasn't an option because we would be on the road up to 250 days a year. So it was like, to imagine stopping, me carrying the pressure of, oh, if we have a baby, people won't work for months. The people in my band won't work. And so it's been a really beautiful season now being here at Friends and even feeling the community around us, where it's like, oh, to have a child and to raise this child amongst community, other young families, a small group, all those types of beautiful things. So, yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's so beautiful to hear that idea of, like, you're going through your career and you didn't necessarily feel like you had that one thought that you could stay and make your home, and you found that community here, which is so amazing. But I would like to hear a little bit more about, like, the start of your music career and, like, how that was going until you came up to Friends. I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah, so I went to Biola University. So for those that don't know, it's a university, Christian university here in Southern California, and actually went to school to get a communications degree, but led worship while I was on campus. But I wouldn't say that it was necessarily something that I thought that I would do post-college. I think I knew that it was something that God had gifted me in, at least music in some capacity. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll just serve in a local church at some point. But I had every intention of going into student development and college counseling, and so I actually applied for a master's program, got in, and then a couple weeks before getting ready to start that program, we got a call, and I mean the group of guys that I had been playing with at Biola, a call that was like, hey, we need a band to come up to this camp that it's like 100 students a week. It was like super small, and would you be willing to kind of make this seemingly reckless decision? It felt kind of reckless, especially because I was like, well, I have a whole master's program ready to go. But it was really this fork in the road where I really believe that God was saying, hey, here's two really great things. Getting your master's degree is a great thing. Like going after this music career is a great thing. Like, they're two wonderful things. One is going to require a lot more faith and come with potentially a lot more fear. But feeling like God was saying, I'd love to invite you into something really adventurous if you would be willing to do it. And so I ended up deferring my program and ultimately never going, but jumping into full-time ministry. And so at that point, my husband and I were already dating, and that kind of launched us into a couple years, well, more than a few years of traveling and eventually signing to a label and releasing multiple national projects and, touring and festivals and all that kind of stuff. Which was such a gift to be able to travel the nation with my husband. But we did reach a point where we did feel so conflicted because we didn't feel like we had a place that was truly home, and a community to really call home. We had been part of multiple house churches because it felt like, hey, if we're going to be gone for 6 weeks, if I come back for one Sunday, it would be nice if it was a small enough group of people that knew me versus coming to a larger place where it feels like I'm just one of potentially thousands. But around 2020, well, really it was the beginning of 2020, we kind of decided as a band, like, hey, we want to leave our label. We kind of want to go a different direction, still continue to do music full time, but kind of on our own terms, which got us really excited. And then everything got canceled. So it was a big identity crisis in a lot of ways because that's all we'd known was just doing that. Like, that was who I was. That's how I spent my time. So to have 9 months to a year of we're not playing anything or making any money and what is even next? Like, is there a next? What happens from here? But I'm really grateful for that time because it allowed us to really dive deeper into, like, who is God calling me to be, not just in a season of being a musician, but for my entire life. And then to start conversations about family and what does that look like. So, yeah.
It sounds like from your story, you've done a beautiful job of leaning into God's voice in your life. Some of those tough decisions come at very pivotal times. You're graduating from college, and it seems like the responsible next step is to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But God called you into a life built on faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say personally that your music and your voice have reached so many people. Mm-hmm. And I've said it multiple times that when you sing, and I've told you this, when you sing, I feel like I'm standing right in the presence of God. And it's neat to see how God has led you from where you thought you were going to go
right
to where he knew you needed to be. And I love that you just leaned into that.
Yeah. It's been an adventure. That's
for sure. Yeah. And I have a similar adventure. I got my master's in clinical psychology, and as I was interviewing for jobs, this job opened up here at church, and it was like, it made sense.
Yeah.
It made perfect sense to continue on because I'd spent all that money on graduate school to go into a therapy. Mm-hmm. And God just opened up this door. And I think sometimes when you take that step, mm-hmm. he really rewards it, and he flourishes who you are, and he flourishes the people around you. And I for sure can see that in your life.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's so many amazing things that come about when it comes to worship. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I think you've been able to tap into, is this idea of unity within the saints. And I'm reminded of like 1 Corinthians 1:10 of like, I appeal to you, brothers, in the name of Jesus, that there be no division amongst mm-hmm. you, but you come together with one mind, one judgment, and one voice. And that's the same thing that comes with worship, is that we're unified as we're praising the Lord together. And I think that's something that you're so uniquely created for, of like bringing everyone together with one voice, praising a God where we can have one mind, and that mind is on loving and praising our God.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful because in the 10 years of being able to do ministry, I wasn't just in one community. We visited thousands of different communities, so you end up getting this much larger picture of what's happening in the body of Christ, even just specifically in America, because you visit some church of 100 in the middle of Oklahoma, and then all of a sudden you're in some like super progressive hip church in Seattle, and then you're in North Carolina at like this mega church, and you just realize like, whoa, God is doing such a similar thing in all of these different communities, and maybe on the surface they would feel or believe that they're so different, and even coming into working at a church and realizing like, oh man, the struggles that we have here as a church community, they're everywhere because we're just people, and so being able to come together and lead people in worship with that perspective that I'm so grateful for, of hey, there are saints all over the nation that are experiencing the same things. And even when I think through the lens of Sunday morning, it's like there are millions of people. If we just think of like our time zones, of like what would happen on Sunday mornings, millions of people that are lifting their voices to the Lord, and we get to join as a part of that song every Sunday morning.
Which is amazing.
It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I think going back earlier to what you mentioned, you weren't expecting for COVID to halt everything, nor were any of us. AJ and I have spent a lot of time talking about what that did to families and to the family culture. But in your case, it led to something really beautiful, and your life is slowed down enough to where you can imagine having a family. And here you are, a couple of weeks away from that.
I know.
And one of the things, we're going to go on a journey, me and you. So one of the things I love to do with moms, I know that when you're pregnant, especially pregnant to the point where you are, where you're on the brink of it, parents are constantly giving you advice, telling you what to do with your marriage and how you should raise your children. And instead of doing that, Emily, I just wanted to do a fun little exercise with you that I love to do with new moms. And so I like to ask new moms first, in your own life, what is the very first memory that you locked in? Something that you remember from your past that you're like, I don't remember anything before that. That's my first memory.
I would say moving into the house that I grew up in. For just having this memory of like coming outside. We lived on a cul-de-sac. And so seeing like the other neighbor kids and like going and introducing myself to them, you know? Which, because I think at that point, my youngest sister wasn't born yet, but I was getting ready to start kindergarten. So right on the brink of turning 5. And just the feeling of like meeting new people, but having that very visual of like walking off my curb across the street and there's kids on the other side. Hi, you know.
I can imagine cute little Emily in pigtails walking across the street.
Just wanting friends.
Well, I do that exercise for 2 reasons. One, it's a beautiful example of where memories start. So you don't remember anything that happened prior. So in those first 5 years of your life, you hadn't locked in any memories. So one thing I want to tell you is that gives you grace. That gives you time to slow down and to learn to be a mom. You have 5 years. And what the kids know and learn in that 5 years is my mom loves me. My mom's attentive to me. When I cry, she picks me up. When I'm hungry, she feeds me. All the other stuff you can learn incrementally along the way. And then when they're 5, it's go time. Because that's when most kids lock in those memories. And it's because they're locking in memories based on emotions. And that sounds like for your kindergarten experience, it was a little bit of nerves, a little bit of excitement. But when we start to combine memories and feelings together, that's when we start to lock them in. So you have some time to slow down and you have some time to learn how to be a mom. So give yourself that grace and that time to do that. And then the other thing that it shows you is that our stories matter. AJ and I have talked multiple times with people in this podcast about the content of their stories. Your origin story is going to matter as you start to raise your kids. So I would encourage you from now until forever. I'm still doing it. I'm about to prepare a kid to launch after this school year. So, and I'm still doing it. I'm still going back and relearning what I need to know, because the truth is the better you know yourself, the better able you are to help your child know themselves too.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I appreciate the grace part of it.
I'm all about grace, 100%.
Yeah, and I think it's something important for everyone to know, because a lot of the times you're coming into something that is very pressurized. Like you have, it's a human life that is now that you're in charge of. And so, and a lot of times we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And so I think what the beautiful thing about Natalie's advice and insight into that is just an opportunity for you to know you have that grace. And 5 years is a lot of time too. So you can just be there loving them, learning in the process, but at the same time knowing that, hey, it's okay if I make a mistake in this. It's okay if something happens here. But all I know is that I have grace in this process. They probably don't remember it anyway. So
totally I feel like even the pressure as my husband and I like get our nursery together. You know, it's like we've fallen into, or baby gear, having the right whatever. It's like my kid doesn't care what stroller I have. He does not care. He doesn't care how many books he has or what kind of toy. I mean, my nephew is 14 months and he wants to play with a paper towel roll.
That sounds about right.
So even, you know, hearing you guys say that and processing, like, one aspect of it is like, making mistakes that, you know, when they become 2.5 and I am so tired and I raise my voice in a way that I didn't want to, that there's grace for that.
Yeah.
But even in these couple weeks leading up to having my son, it's like, as I prepare and create an environment where he'll sleep and play, that all of that pressure's off too, you know, that is, culture would tell us, it's so funny, I've related it so much even to like the wedding culture, where it's like, we have to have this massive wedding. But when I think back to my wedding, I just think about like the people that were there, you know, and it's the same, it sounds like the same premise of, my son's just going to remember like the relationships and the love, not what color his curtains were, you know, or how many toys he had, you know. That can be part of him feeling loved, but it's the relationships that are going to go so much further.
Yeah. Room decor will definitely come in as he gets older, so just relax.
Wait till then.
Yeah, for sure.
I do like that idea of the fact that like it doesn't have to be this perfect ideal thing, and that's what society tells you. You have to do it this way in order for it to be right, and sometimes it just never happens that way. And so we end up looking at it as if we are failures because it didn't happen the way it's supposed to happen. And so I think it's so beautiful for you to know, like, hey, I have grace in this. It doesn't have to be as perfect as society says it has to be. And as your son develops and grows, he will become who he is through the grace that you've given to him, as well as the grace you've given to yourself.
Yeah, it's a good reminder.
It is. And I also, when we do our child dedication class, I say a verse over the families. And intrinsically, when you just read this verse, it's like, yeah, that's a great verse. I will 100% do that. And so I just wanted to read that verse with you now, and then sort of explain the backstory on why it's so important. So it comes from Exodus, and it's in chapter 6, and it's verse 6 through 9. And it says, "These commandments that I give you today are to be on your heart. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them to your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your house and on your gates." So that's beautiful. I mean, that as a standalone passage from the Bible is beautiful. Yes, definitely share God's commandments with your children, infuse faith into their lives. But then when you take that verse and you go back a little bit to where the Israelites have come from. So the Israelites, as you know, made an exodus out of Egypt. They were taken from Egypt by God into what will eventually be the promised land. And what God is saying here is that there's this new generation of children that are coming up. You're raising a generation of children who didn't see me take them through the plagues, who wasn't there as we crossed the Red Sea together, who didn't stand in the desert as I delivered manna and water for you. So remind them. Tell them that these are my rules for them, but then tell them why these are my reasons for them and how I got you here. And so, again, when AJ and I talk about stories on this podcast, it's because they matter. Stories mattered so much to God that when Jesus came to earth, almost every conversation he had with people, he shared a story with them first. It will help your children understand the Bible better, their relationship with God better, and then it will just infuse faith not only into your children's life, but into your lives. Because if you're doing parenting right and you're doing faith infusing into your children right, what you start to see is a reciprocal faith. You'll see what you're teaching them come right back at you, and it's so beautiful.
Oh, wow. Yeah, as I think through that, there's just so many things that, you know, the Lord has obviously taught me over many years, and as I get into adulthood and even thinking through, you know, that cycle of what are the things that I've really struggled with to believe that are true about God, and then and connecting it to my origin story, you know, and looking back, and not a reflection at all, which this is even crazy to think about as becoming a parent. It wasn't even a reflection of my parents. They were wonderful parents, but that lies make their way in, and you respond in different ways as an oldest of 3, like carrying a lot more weight and saying like, oh, it's my responsibility to be like the really perfect child in the family, and being afraid of failure and all these different things. And now, you know, imagining holding my son and not wanting any of that for him to rest and know I'm fully loved by God, and I don't have to be afraid to fail whether it's because I'm afraid that my parents will be disappointed in me, or, I mean, the bigger picture, which was for me, I don't want God to be disappointed in me, you know? And so thinking through that passage and just the reminding aspect of constantly, well, one, inviting my child into that, you know, that I've felt that, you know, and then reminding him of the truth of who God is, so that he doesn't fall into that same cycle that I fell into. It's really just like, well, we talk about like breaking generational cycles, you know, of like, no, you're invited into a life of adventure and joy and grace, no fear, you know, and hopefully seeing parents who did take risks, but knowing that in the midst of all the risks, my brain inside was like, oh no, I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to fail. But what a beautiful thing to invite my son into that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think everything we're discussing today that is just so helpful. I think the two things that I would say we could take from today is, one, even starting with your original story of how you were starting your music career, how you were traveling, and it wasn't until you actually found community, a place where you felt like it was home, that you could feel like you could actually start a family. And definitely one thing I would say I've taken from that is just leaning into that community. As you now are becoming a first-time mom, you will have now this community that is supporting and loving, which you've already seen, and you will see even more as your son enters into this world. That community is needed. It's so helpful in the process of like, hey, maybe I need to go out and have a date night with my husband. Maybe we need somebody to watch the kid, or even just somebody to be there for us when we're having a tough time. But leaning into that community that you found that actually gave you the comfortability to start a family. And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is there's grace. In all things, I think we always forget that there's grace, and we tend to just like continue to go into this cycle of we need to be perfect, as you were just mentioning. But now we need to realize that in all aspects of our lives there is grace, there's opportunity for growth, and that it doesn't need to be this perfect thing that the world tells us it needs to be. No, there's grace in that we can make those mistakes, and as we continue to make those mistakes, as long as we're leading our child or ourselves to the Lord, there's always going to be growth in that. And you're going to become a stronger mother. He'll become a stronger son. Johnny will become a stronger father, as long as they're looking to the ultimate father. And so super excited. And I think no matter what, music, parenthood, they're all such great things. And even today, I know we're going to be actually having you bless us with her angelic voice and singing a song for us. And so if you wanted to talk a little bit about that song and then just go straight into it.
Yeah, so this is a song that the band that I'm a part of released in 2015 17. And I was on a journey. I remember it was 2017 because that's right around the time that we entered into label discussions and feeling the pressure and the weight to not mess up. Hey, we've been given this opportunity, don't screw it up, you know? And it all kind of started with one evening, we were just at home and I started having some really intense chest pain, and I said, let's just go for a walk, and it kind of settled out. But that launched me into probably 4 months of insomnia, like waking up in the middle of the night when I could sleep with like a panicked heart, eventually going to the hospital because I felt like am I having a heart attack? I don't know what's happening to me. And the doctors and the nurses just saying like, I think it's just stress, you know? And so right around that time we had scheduled a co-write, and one of the guys who we were writing with, he kind of came in with the beginnings of this chorus. And I remember when he started singing it, it was like the truth in the song just leapt out at me. Like, whoa, that is the song. Sometimes when you're writing worship songs, you hear something or you write something and you're like, wow, what a beautiful truth for us to sing collectively, you know? Or maybe I'm writing a song and I'm thinking about Friends Church, and it's like, this is a season that we're in, like what a beautiful thing for us to sing about God. This was like, even if nobody leads this song ever, it's for me, you know? This is like what I needed to hear, like my soul is being ministered to in the moment. And And so that led us into finishing this song. And as we kind of talk about remembering and teaching our children and letting them in on where we've been and what God has taught us, I think these are the truths that I would want him to stand so firm in. The chorus kind of, it has two parts, but it says, God, you're bigger than my fear. But then it also says you're bigger than my dreams. So it's like all the good things that we could imagine for our lives, which were the things I was holding so tightly to. Like, I can't screw this up. It's like, God's even bigger than that, you know? And it ends just with saying, so God, I trust you. And as we'll play the song in a minute here. And I imagine my son hearing it. It's like my prayer is that that would really be the cry of his heart. And that it wouldn't have to come from 4 months of panic attacks and then learning to trust. But it would be, prayerfully through the stories of his parents, then saying, no, I've seen God's faithfulness in my parents' lives. There's no reason that I shouldn't trust him and believe that he's bigger than any fear or any dream.
Well, I already have the chills from listening to you describe the song. So we are so excited, Emily, to hear this.
You are able to provide, and you are faithful in perfect time. Your goodness overwhelms. I am held, and through the fire, you're my shield, your protection. It never fails. No power can separate. I am safe. You are bigger than all my fears. God of love, God my love. You are bigger than all my dreams. God, my hope, God, my peace. Whatever will come my way, through each day I will say, God, I trust you. I trust you. And you're the treasure that I desire. Oh, I surrender my whole life for your glory, my great reward. I am yours. Use me, Lord. You are bigger than all my fears. God of love, God my love. You are bigger than all my dreams. God my hope, God my peace. Whatever will come my way, through each day I will say, God, I trust you. I trust you. Yes, you are the God who always sees us, even in barren, desperate seasons. No matter what the circumstance, you are the rock on which I stand. You are the God who always sees us, even in barren, desperate seasons. No matter what the circumstance, you are the rock on which I stand. Yes, you are bigger than all my fears. God of love, God my love. You are bigger than all my dreams. God my hope, God my peace. whatever will come my way. Through each day I will say, God, I trust you, I trust you. You are bigger than all my fears, God of love, God my love. You are bigger than all my dreams, God my hope, God my peace. Whatever will come my way through each day, oh, I will say, God, I trust you, I trust you. Oh, God, I trust you.
Oh, that was so amazing. Thank you so much, Emily, for sharing that with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We loved having you here, and we loved having you hang out with us. Hopefully you can come back on someday.
I'd love to.
We're going to have some more stories to tell this season. Until then, we just want our families to know that we're journeying with you, we're praying for you, and we're walking beside you and your family in love.